Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 759. My opponent started off with d4, and I went with knight f6, which can introduce a number of different systems, including the King's Indian or the Grunfeld like I played here, or the Nimzo Indian. Anyway, he went with c4, and I went with g6. So e6 to go to the Nimzo, g6 to go with the King's Indian or Grunfeld. He goes knight c3, and then d5. You have to play this move right here, because if you don't get d5 in, then white can continue with e4 and rule out the Grunfeld. So if you want to play this, you've got to stick in that d5 move right here. And then there's lots of ways to play the Grunfeld. The two most common continuations are the taking, and actually its top choice is what I like to play as white. Basically, white gets a big center and black tries to undermine it. And yeah, it's interesting play for both sides. Let's see, knight f3 is kind of a quieter continuation, maybe continuing with the e3 and just holding on to the center and not trying to overexpand. And then these other moves, bishop f4 and bishop g5, are kind of sidelines, but I've been seeing them increasingly, and particularly this is a move I've seen before. And I always forget to play knight e4, but this time I remembered it. Yeah, the last time I had this, I was looking at the position and I was thinking, well, what about knight takes? Isn't that kind of annoying in that position? But it turns out that this knight takes e4, which my opponent played, is really a slight mistake. The main move is bishop, just retreating the bishop either to h4 or f4, and then, well, white can continue like this. I mean, black can continue like this, taking off and then grabbing the pawn. Although you don't have to grab the pawn. You could also continue with bishop to g7 and c5 like a normal Grunfeld. There was something a little bit funny here with the move e3 versus e4. You know, moving the e-pawn seems pretty natural, trying to round up this pawn, and white is going to get that back one way or another. The thing is that after e3, the main move was bishop e6, whereas after e4, the main move was b4, and I was trying to figure out what was the difference. And after going through a couple of variations, what I realized was that e3 brings out this possibility of queen to f3. So if you move the b pawn forward, the queen hits that rook with a tempo, and sometimes, well, like here, if the knight is blocking the way, the rook has trouble getting out of that tight spot. In this case, you can block with a pawn, but there was some line where b4 was met with b5 was met with a4, and then after c6 there was an exchange, and then queen to f3 came, and the rook couldn't escape. The rook was lost there. So anyway, after e3, the pawn is normally defended with the move bishop to e6, whereas after e4 it's defended with the b4. Kind of a funny point there. Anyway, I was just curious about that. Since I play the Grunfeld, I want to try and learn some of these ins and outs of the opening. But he just took on e4, and this seems to be fine for black. You know, I would think maybe this pawn would get in trouble, and you're kind of giving white some big center pawns there, but well, you've got this doubled e-pawn, and this pawn is hard to round up. It's kind of cramping white's position there. So this all turns out to be okay for black. Let's see, he played e3 here, bishop g7. So, and it just continues like a normal Grunfeld from here. I go c5, so typical Grunfeld play where I'm just trying to undermine the center. I'm going to continue with knight c6, maybe queen b6, depending on circumstances. And then right here, queen d2 is the main move. Queen d2 is a nice idea. It's mainly to take a sideways look at this b pawn, so that the d pawn here is free to move. You see in the game he actually loses the b pawn, but he didn't play that. He played in this position after I went c5. He went h3, and this is a slow move, and after this actually white's in trouble, and white is worse the rest of the game. So just one little slip like that, and things can go downhill in a hurry. So it's well, it's one of the good things about playing these sharp openings, is that your opponent can mess up, and you can get an advantage from early on in the game. So knight c6 is the correct response. If you try and take right away, I was wondering about this after the game. You know, taking right away is a little bit attractive because it sets up this tactic, queen here check, hitting both the bishop, which is loose there, and the king here, not there, and the king. Anyway, there's a fork there with the queen a5 check, and but he doesn't. He takes with the pawn. If he takes the knight, then he might get into trouble. But he takes with the pawn, and then the check is met with bishop to d2. So taking right away doesn't work. And knight to c6, just the normal move you would play, playing the Grunfeld, increases the pressure on the center, and really he can't hold the center at this point. He's going to lose a pawn or get into trouble one way or another. So even though d takes c5 looked like it was a mistake in the game, there was not much better that he could play. So he could try to grab the e-pawn in exchange for the d-pawn by playing a move like knight to c3. But, well, the chess engine prefers white quite a lot in this line after the exchange. Let's see. Oh, not knight takes, but bishop takes. I guess that's the point. After all of those exchanges, he grabs this pawn. Once again, the b2 pawn is hanging, so so he ends up down a pawn anyway. So he's already in trouble after that h3 move and knight c6. So anyway, he tried d takes c5. That was one of the top engine choices, so it was not a bad idea. And then I didn't play the best response here. I just went ahead and grabbed the pawn, which I think is still good, but it's actually even stronger to throw in the check, according to the chess engine. This actually doesn't win material, but it gives black this tremendous lead in development, because when you take on c5, that check and take a pawn is something I thought about during the game. What I didn't notice is that it gains a tempo on this bishop, so the bishop has to move, and then you castle. And if you look at this position, the material is even, but well, look at the difference in development. You know, I'm castled. I've got all my pieces out except for this bishop, and he can't castle, and his bishop is stuck behind this knight, so his pieces are somewhat tangled, and his pawns are loose. There's this strong bishop I have coming across this diagonal, and this pawn can't easily come to defend the c-pawn. Yeah, so white is just suffering in this position. So that's the best way to play according to the chess engine. I just grabbed the material. This is evening things up. Actually, I'm not a pawn up yet, but the remaining pawns are going to be weak, and it won't be too hard for me to round one of those up. So effectively, I'm a pawn up already. He went for the trade. I actually didn't notice for some reason that there was a trade. If I was going to grab the pawn with the bishop takes b2, it would have been more effective for me to trade queens first and then take the pawn. But anyway, this is the way it went. He took the queen. I took back with the knight. King takes is similar according to the chess engine, but I wanted to keep the ability to castle. Now let's see. He went rook d1. Slightly stronger is rook to b1, chasing my bishop and provoking a trade here. But this is still going to be good for black. He still has these, white still has these weak pawns that I can round up. But you know, that's a more active post for his rook on the b file, looking at this c pawn, which well, at the moment it's defended by both the knight and the bishop, but I don't want to keep my pieces tied down defending that. So there'll be a little bit of you know, I have to navigate this a little bit carefully to unwind from this position. I don't want to give that pawn away either, but I need to free up my pieces. So that gives white some chances, but black should still be winning even in those lines. Okay, so he went rook d1. I went knight to e6, and this nets me the pawn immediately. He has no way to defend the c pawn. So let's see, he dropped his bishop back. I grabbed the pawn, so now I really am a pawn up. Let's see, he went knight to c1, and I just brought my, oh, that's right, I developed my bishop to e6, and took a look at the c pawn here. Let's see, he went knight b3, and now I have this check, and this gets him into big trouble. He has difficulty untangling, and if the king comes forward, then bishop takes c5 check is It might even be mate because he can only block with the rook. No, actually, after he gives up the rook, then I guess this king can walk out to d1. But anyway, it's certainly big trouble. So anyway, played knight d2 to block. That's probably the only move there. And I just played rook d8, piling up. So I think I did a reasonable job here, just maintaining the pressure against White's awkward position. When your opponent is all, and his pieces are all tangled up like that, you know, sometimes just piling up, you know, not doing anything dramatic. Although you always want to look for those tactics, but sometimes just piling up and taking advantage of his inability to organize his pieces is the best way to go. Let's see. He went bishop to e2, and I went knight to d3 check. The chess engine likes to move f6, which is pretty interesting. It's kind of like saying that there's nothing you can do. If he castles, for example, then this knight is lost, and he needs his king to defend the knight. And the knight can't move because it's pinned against the king. So king moves and knight moves are out. The rook can't move because it's needed to defend the knight as well. And the bishop has to stay on this diagonal to defend the c-pawn. And this bishop isn't doing a whole lot. So it seems like just kind of waiting moves are the only thing that White has. So maybe a3, king f7, bishop g3, and then at this point finally breaking through with rook takes d2. With the king out of the way, the threat of rook to d8 attacking that pinned rook will win an entire piece. So that is the best way to take advantage of this position. So knight d3 check was good as well, but not the most accurate move. Let's see, he took, I took, and yeah, I just think that's pretty interesting. You're taking advantage, the way the computer played that, you're just taking advantage of your opponent's inability to organize his forces and just slowly increasing the threats. Okay, but anyway, yeah, went with this trade, and yeah, I'm still keeping the pressure on, and I still wanted to castle and get my rook to the d file. So let's see, he played c5 here. I was threatening to just take that. So I went with f6 now, with the same kind of idea. Just move the king out of the way and bring a rook to the d file. But, well, it's not as good because after those trades he has another square for his king. So king e2 unpins the knight. So at this point I decided to trade everything out and go for the endgame. The chess engine says, so I'll just keep the pressure on and play f5. That was the chess engine recommendation. But this should lead to a winning position. I just miscalculated one thing, or overlooked one thing, a very typical kind of mistake that I make. I saw at the end I would win this pawn, and then I just grabbed it, and I failed to notice that he had this rook a1 move to get the pawn back immediately. Although even after this I have an advantage. After all these trades, I didn't have to grab that pawn right away. I could have just gone king to d7. That was also a chess engine recommendation. I mean, he's got weaknesses all over. He's also going to have trouble defending that c-pawn. And he can't activate the rook immediately because his king is blocking the way. So anyway, that would be best at that point. But this is still winning because I come back here and I'm a pawn up. But we have opposite colored bishops, but it's not a simple opposite colored bishops endgame. It's because we have the rooks on still. So I should be in good shape as long as I stay active with my pieces. So king to f7 is what I played here. Yeah, I wanted to be able to bring the rook into the game. He went bishop to g3, trying to get his bishop into the game. But all my pawns are pretty well placed. He doesn't have many targets. Only these two pawns here are on dark squares at the moment. Let's see. After bishop g3, I went rook to c8, targeting this pawn, and he defended from the side. And then I shut out his bishop. I'm just taking squares away from the bishop. The bishop is trying to route around in some way. King e6, just activating my king. Goes with g4. I go with f5, and I was thinking these moves helped me a little bit, but looking at this with the chess engine, it seems like there was not a lot he could do anyway. Anyway, I wanted to push my pawns forward and try and take advantage of the majority over here while holding his pieces at bay on the queen side. So I went rook f8. He went king to c3, coming over here to defend the pawn and maybe free up his rook. And then I just pushed on with f4. Let's see. I looked at another line. Yeah, king c3 was not the best move. The chess engine likes playing like this, c6. And notice I can't take with the bishop because he's got rook takes e-pawn. So I'd have to take with the pawn. Makes it a little easier for it to stop if it's closer to the center of the board. And then rook a7. But I still have an advantage here with f4 and the exchange. And then he gets this pawn. But I'm crashing through in the center. So this is still a winning position for black, even with the best defense there. So king c3, not the best defense. And I push on with f4. And I think it all starts to fall apart at this point. He could try something else. Yeah, I tried other lines besides just taking, because I was thinking during the game taking was a mistake. But it seems like there's not much he can do. Chess engine gives alternate lines. It gives e takes f4 actually is the first choice. So I guess that was sort of necessary. But if he just kind of shuffles around with his rook, my king can start to come forward. And I can put pressure on this pawn as well as threaten to push these forward. And if he brings this pawn forward, then my king can step in here. So it looks like cancel that. Looks like I'm winning this pawn anyway. So anyway, he took and then played rook a2. Came forward with king to f5. I guess I was wanting to not run out of time, so I was moving kind of quickly. But of course, rook to a2, I could have just taken it. So that was the only horrible blunder in this game. Otherwise, it was reasonably well played. And then the rest of the game is pretty straightforward from here. No big mistakes. I just keep marching these pawns forward, and he slowly runs out of ways to defend everything with my active king. I can round up these pawns over here on the king side and then start pushing my remaining pawns forward. And he finally ran out of time at this point, but there was no way he was going to defend this position in any case. It was all winning. So anyway, it was an interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you again soon. Bye.